My friends convinced me to go to the club for a birthday party. I genuinely didn't want to attend. I explained that I was exhausted and that my wife was away on a business trip. They wouldn't take no for an answer, however. And here's the supreme twist of irony. Had I stayed home that evening, I would still be trapped in a fantasy, because it was on that very night that I witnessed my wife kissing another man. My name is Andrew. I am 34 years old. My wife's name is Melissa. She is a marketing executive whose job requires frequent travel. Our relationship spans 6 years, 5 of them in marriage. My trust in her was absolute. When she packed her bags and informed me, "I'm heading to Seattle for 3 days," I would simply give her a kiss on the cheek and wish her well. Why would you ever question the person you love? Looking back now, I realize how incredibly gullible I sound. But that's the nature of trust, isn't it? It has to be unconditional. That's precisely what makes it trust. The moment you start scrutinizing every itinerary, examining receipts, and monitoring phone calls, you know the foundation is already crumbling. I never wanted to be that kind of spouse. I refused to become the sort of man who suffocates his partner with suspicion. Melissa and I first met at a friend's wedding. A total cliché, I know. She was the bridesmaid who caught the bouquet, and I was the groomsman whose jokes made her laugh during the seemingly endless photo shoot. We swapped numbers and had our first date at a downtown Italian place. I remember thinking clearly that night, this woman is something special. She was focused, highly motivated, and self-assured. She had a clear vision for her life. This ambition was something I greatly admired. I was a software engineer at a medium-sized tech company, comfortable but uninspired by my work. She inspired me to strive for more, to set higher goals, and to genuinely care about my professional development instead of merely drifting along. Our courtship was intense and deeply felt. We took weekend trips to the mountains, had lengthy conversations that continued until the early hours of the morning, and shared private jokes that gave us stomach cramps from laughing. When I asked her to marry me on a Mexican beach as the sunset painted the sky in perfect hues, she wept and accepted before I could even finish my meticulously prepared speech. The wedding itself was beautiful. Her parents adored me, and my parents loved her. Everyone commented on how we were a perfect match, and I accepted it wholeheartedly. I believed it with every particle of my being. As we were warned, the first year of marriage involved major adjustments. We had to learn to share our living space and compromise on everything from the thermostat setting to which family we visited during the holidays. However, I thought we managed it successfully. We were great at communicating. We deliberately set aside time for each other. Our Friday nights were non-negotiable. No phones, no discussions about work, just us. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now to the rest of the story. Then her professional life really took flight. A promotion to senior marketing director brought greater authority, larger clients, and inevitably, more travel. Initially, it was once a month, then it became twice. Soon, it felt like she was away more often than she was home. Yet, I stood by her. That's what love demands, right? You champion their aspirations. You don't impede their growth because of your own anxieties. When she returned exhausted from a week in Chicago or Los Angeles, I would have dinner ready, run her bathwater, and listen as she vented about difficult clients and inept coworkers. I was certain I was a dedicated husband. I thought we were constructing a life together, even if the blueprint of that life necessitated some temporary physical distance. I was wrong about countless things. That particular Friday began just like any other. I arrived home from the office around 6 o'clock, changed into a t-shirt and jeans, and settled on the sofa with a beer and a World War II documentary. Melissa was supposedly in Portland attending a 3-day conference. She had departed on Wednesday morning, kissed me goodbye at the front door, and reminded me to hydrate her sunroom plants. My phone rang around 7:30. It was Ben, one of my oldest friends from college. "Drew, you absolutely have to join us tonight. It's Marcus's birthday celebration. We're hitting that trendy new spot downtown, the Apex. Everyone will be there." I let out a sigh. Man, I'm completely drained. It's been an arduous week. I'm just planning to relax at home. "Oh, come on. When was the last time you joined us? You've practically become a recluse. Melissa's not in town anyway, right? What else are you going to do? Watch the History Channel all by yourself on a Friday night?" He had a solid argument, but I continued to resist. I'm just not in the mood for deafening music and overpriced cocktails. 1 hour, Ben bargained. "Just come for 60 minutes, have a couple of drinks, wish Marcus a happy birthday, then you can head home and be boring." Agreed. I sighed again. Ben could be relentless when he made up his mind, and honestly, I had been isolating myself recently. What with work and Melissa's travel, my social interactions had nearly ceased. "Fine, 1 hour, that's it." "There you go. We're meeting at 9 o'clock. Dress nicely. This venue has a strict dress code." After ending the call, I actually felt a small burst of energy. Perhaps a night out would be beneficial. I took a shower, put on a nice button-down shirt and black slacks, and checked my reflection. Not bad for a guy who'd been ordering too much takeout lately. I sent a text to Melissa. Stepping out with Ben and the guys for Marcus's birthday. Missing you. Hope the conference is productive. She replied almost instantly. Enjoy yourself, darling. Don't overdo the drinking. Face blowing a kiss emoji. The conference is dull as usual. Love you. I smiled down at my phone. See, everything was fine. I realized I was just being overly anxious earlier when that weird feeling had hit me. That peculiar suspicion that something was amiss was merely my anxiety talking, the kind that flares up when you spend too much time alone with your thoughts. When I arrived, the apex was completely full. The bass rhythm from the music thumped through the floor and into my chest. Strobe lights pierced the manufactured haze. Attractive people in designer clothing gathered around tall tables, shouting to hold conversations over the racket. I located Ben and the others close to the VIP section. Marcus, the man of the hour, had already consumed several drinks and was delighted to see me. Andrew, you actually made it. I was beginning to think you transformed into a vampire who only ventures out during business hours. We chuckled, took shots, and quickly fell back into the comfortable camaraderie of male friendship, sports analysis, griping about work, and friendly teasing. For the first time in weeks, I felt carefree, engaged, and connected to something beyond my computer screen or an empty residence. That's when my world shifted. I saw her. Initially, it was merely a fleeting view, a flash of dark, familiar hair across the dense crowd. My mind registered the sight, but immediately dismissed it. Melissa was supposedly in Portland, hundreds of miles away. This was just some woman with a similar hairstyle. But a gut feeling, a fundamental instinct that bypasses all reason, forced me to look again. She was standing close to the main bar, roughly 30 feet from me. The lighting was low, and the area was thick with people. But I was certain. I recognized the way she carried herself, the distinct tilt of her head when she laughed, and the exact slope of her shoulder in that black dress I'd seen her try on 3 months earlier while shopping together. My heart began to race wildly. This could not be happening. It had to be a huge mistake. Maybe she had to end her trip early. Perhaps there was an emergency, and she'd flown back unexpectedly and came here to surprise me after seeing Ben's social media post about the party. But even as I formed these justifications, I knew they were lies. I knew because of how she stood so intimately close to a man I had never laid eyes on. Because of the way she was gazing at him, and because of the narrow space between them that suggested familiarity, ease, and something that twisted my stomach into a knot of ice. I began pushing my way toward them through the crowd. My friends yelled my name, but their voices sounded distant and muted, as if I were submerged underwater. All my focus was narrowed to one point. My wife, present at a club where she should not be, in a city where she claimed not to be, with a man who was not me. I was about 10 feet away when she chuckled at something he said, reached up, and kissed him. Not a brief peck, not an accidental brush of the lips, but a genuine kiss. The kind of kiss that implies a history of other kisses, a past, a relationship that existed in deception and shadow. My world ground to a halt. Actually stopped. I could hear every beat of my own heart, feeling each pulse of blood in my veins. All the noise in the club receded into a buzzing white noise. I watched my wife, pull away from this stranger's lips and smile up at him with the very expression I believed was reserved only for me. I don't recall making the conscious choice to approach them. My body took over, propelled by raw hurt, fury, and a primal urge. Melissa. My voice was even and chillingly calm. I barely recognized it as my own. She spun around. Her face cycled through 5 different reactions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, total shock, fear, and then a desperate attempt to appear composed. Andrew, what are you? I thought you were in Seattle. No, wait, Portland. Which city did you claim this time? I shifted my gaze to the man beside her. He was conventionally attractive, tall, athletic, with an expensive wristwatch. He looked confused, but not yet threatened. Who is this person? Drew, this is not. You don't understand. The man stepped forward. Listen, pal. I don't know who you are, but... That's when I struck him. I am not normally a violent person. I had not been in a physical fight since high school. But in that instant, I just lost control. My fist connected squarely with his jaw, sending him staggering backward and crashing into a group of people behind him. Panic broke out. People screamed. Security staff materialized instantly. Ben and Marcus grabbed my arms and forcibly pulled me away. The man was on the ground, holding his face, staring up at me with a mix of anger and shock. And Melissa. Melissa got between us, her hands raised, and screamed a sentence that shattered the few remaining fragments of my heart. Don't touch him. You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. I stared at her. I truly stared. This woman I had shared a bed with for 5 years. This woman I envisioned growing old with, raising a family with, and building a lifetime of memories with. Not what it looks like, I repeated slowly. You're intimately kissing another man in a public club when you're supposedly at a professional conference. What, precisely, is the mistake I'm making, Melissa? Security was now forcefully moving through the crowd. People were recording the scene on their phones. The man was being helped to his feet by his friends. Sir, you must vacate the premises immediately. A massive security guard clamped onto my arm. I offered no resistance. I looked at Melissa one final time. She was weeping, mascara streaking down her cheeks, reaching out for me. Drew, please allow me to explain. Don't, I told her softly. Do not utter another word. I let the security team lead me outside. Ben and Marcus followed, asking questions I was incapable of answering. I stood on the cool sidewalk in the night air, my hand pounding, my mind completely numb. Dude, what in the world just happened? Ben asked. That was my wife, I said. That was Melissa. I didn't go back to our house that night. I simply couldn't. The idea of sleeping in our marital bed, surrounded by our possessions in the home where we had made our solemn vows, felt completely suffocating. Ben brought me back to his apartment. He was considerate. He didn't press for any information or push for details. He simply handed me a beer, a blanket, and allowed me to sit in silence on his couch while I tried to process the catastrophic events of the last hour. My phone was constantly vibrating, calls, texts, and voicemails from Melissa. I turned it off. I spent the whole night staring at the ceiling, observing the moving shadows and mentally reviewing every single moment of the last 6 years, searching for any clues I might have overlooked. There must have been warning signs, right? No one just decides to start an affair overnight. It is a slow descent, a chain of conscious choices and compounded lies. The supposed Portland conference, it didn't exist, or perhaps it did, but she wasn't there. How many other times? How many supposed business trips were actually secret rendezvous with him? I mentally ran through all the times she'd returned home, and I'd inquired about her trip, and she had provided me with vivid descriptions of tedious meetings and overpriced hotel room service. Were those also fabrications? How much of my life had been a complete fantasy? When the sun finally rose, I felt utterly empty. The anger was gone. The pain had subsided, leaving behind only a void, as if someone had reached inside my chest and meticulously emptied everything out. I called my workplace and requested a personal week off. My manager, who had never known me to take a sick day in 3 years, respectfully refrained from asking questions. I reactivated my phone and immediately blocked Melissa's number. Then I called a divorce attorney. Melissa Lawson, by the time you read this letter, you will have undoubtedly tried to reach me numerous times. You will have sent texts, left messages, and possibly even driven to the house. I will not be responding. I will not be home, and I need you to fully grasp why. I married you because I was deeply in love with you. I am not speaking in the past tense out of spite. I genuinely loved you with my whole self. I granted you my complete trust, which I now realize was incredibly foolish, but it was absolutely sincere. When you claimed you were traveling for professional reasons, I believed you implicitly. When you kissed me goodbye at the door, I never questioned that you belonged to me and I to you. That terrible night at the club utterly destroyed me. Not simply because I saw you kissing another man, though that particular image will likely torment me for the rest of my existence, but because in that one instant, I understood that every single thing I thought was real was actually a meticulously constructed deception. How many journeys, Melissa? How many times did you look into my eyes and tell me that you loved me, only to go and do that very thing? I have no desire for explanations. I do not want to hear that it was an accident, or that you never intended to hurt me, or any of the predictable excuses people use to rationalize betrayal. None of it holds any weight. The reason why doesn't change the indisputable fact of what you did. I have filed for divorce. The official papers are located on the kitchen table. My attorney will take care of all subsequent arrangements. The house was purchased before our marriage and remains exclusively in my name. Therefore, I require you to vacate the premises within the next 7 days. I have hired movers to assist you in packing your personal effects. Take anything you desire. The furniture, the artwork, the kitchen equipment. I simply do not care. The only thing I am keeping is my sense of self-respect, something you cannot take from me because you have already given me the most profound gift, perspective. I will not disparage you to our friends, nor will I inform your family, nor will I post angry rants on social media. I am simply going to remove you from my life as swiftly and cleanly as possible, the same way a doctor removes a malignant tumor. Thank you for revealing your true nature. It saved me from dedicating any more years to a person who was never truly committed to me from the start. Andrew. P.S. Do not attempt to contact me. Do not appear at my place of employment. Do not use our friends as intermediaries. I will see you in court, and that will be the last time I ever see you. Through mutual acquaintances and unavoidable glimpses on social media, I eventually pieced together the remainder of the narrative. I honestly was not seeking the details. I truly intended to move forward, but people enjoy gossiping, especially regarding dramatic marital collapses. Melissa's affair partner was named Derek. He was a consultant she had initially met at a legitimate conference 6 months prior. The affair began as emotional infidelity, continuous text message exchanges and late-night calls disguised as professional matters. It escalated to physical contact when they began deliberately aligning their work travel schedules to be in the same cities. Some of her business trips were real, but many were fabrications. She would take a day off work, tell me she was flying to Chicago, but in reality, she would drive 2 hours to meet Derek at a hotel in a nearby state. She would share old conference photos on social media to maintain the charade. To answer my questions convincingly, she even memorized specific details about cities she had previously visited. The most disturbing element. She had once told me about a coworker who was having an affair, and we had discussed how self-centered and pathetic cheaters were. She had looked me directly in the eye and declared, "I could never do that to you. The guilt would destroy me." And I had believed her entirely. The night I discovered them was an extreme twist of fate. Derek resided in my city, but they habitually met elsewhere to avoid detection. On that specific evening, Melissa had informed me she was in Portland, but she was actually staying with him at a downtown hotel. They chose to go to the Apex because it was trendy and new, and Derek wanted to make a good impression on her. She never imagined for a second I would be there. The probability was nearly zero, yet there I was. And her meticulously constructed double life crumbled in mere seconds. Here is the part that might sound trivial, but it afforded me a grim satisfaction. Derek essentially vanished from her life almost immediately. After our confrontation in the club, the ensuing drama, and the inevitable social media storm, he clearly decided she was not worth the complications. He blocked her number, avoided her at industry events, and within 3 weeks, he was sharing photos with another woman. Melissa had ruined her marriage for a man who abandoned her the instant the situation became difficult. There is probably a valuable lesson there about how people who participate in cheating rarely remain to face the aftermath, but it wasn't a lesson I needed to learn. She did. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly simple. Melissa did not dispute any terms. She signed the papers without creating drama, retained her own lawyer who had minimal communication with mine, and moved out of the house within the 7-day period I requested. She took her clothes, her books, some home office furniture, and a few pieces of artwork we had purchased together. She left her key sitting on the kitchen counter. On the day the movers arrived, I stayed at Ben's place. I was determined not to see her. I didn't want to risk a conversation that might trigger sympathy or provide her with an opening to plead her case. My lawyer informed me that she had initially attempted to argue for a share of the house, claiming that 5 years of marriage entitled her to community property. However, since I had bought it 2 years before our wedding, and the deed was solely in my name, she had no legal entitlement. That seemed to truly break her spirit. The realization that she had destroyed everything and was left with nothing but shame and an empty apartment in a neighborhood she once deemed depressing. Friends reported that she was struggling, that she had lost weight, was attending therapy, and had apparently resigned from her job because facing colleagues who knew about the affair was too humiliating. A small, vindictive corner of my mind felt satisfied by this turn of events. But mostly, I just felt a profound absence of emotion. The most challenging aspect was neither the legal procedures nor the division of assets. It was the recurring, quiet moments, waking up and automatically reaching for her side of the mattress only to find it cool and empty, brewing coffee and instinctively pouring 2 full cups, hearing a song on the radio we had danced to in the living room and having to pull over because tears blurred my vision. It involved consciously avoiding restaurants where we had celebrated milestones, staying clear of certain sections of the grocery store that carried her specific tea brand, and altering my running route because it passed the park where I had proposed marriage. It was the constant, phantom ache of losing a person who was never fully present in the first place. 6 months after that chaotic night at the club, I was an altered person. Not necessarily improved, not worse, just fundamentally different. I had immersed myself in my career, accepting a promotion I might not have entirely earned, but embracing it anyway because ambition seemed a healthier vice than excessive drinking or resentment. I began consistently exercising at the gym, not as a means of seeking revenge or making Melissa regret her departure, but because physical exertion offered a distraction from emotional pain, and endorphins came free of charge. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the marriage. I attended more social gatherings, dinner parties, and weekend hiking trips. I taught myself how to be alone without feeling solitary. I cooked meals for one without feeling pathetic. I watched films of my own choosing. I decorated my house according to my personal taste. I lived by my own schedule instead of coordinating with someone else's. The house, which had once felt like a tombstone for dead dreams, slowly began to feel like my own home again. I repainted the bedroom, donated the furniture Melissa had abandoned, and bought fresh linens that didn't carry her scent or memory. I adopted a dog, a rescue pit bull named Max, who had been abandoned by his former owners. It felt oddly appropriate. I didn't pursue dating. I had zero interest. The notion of trusting someone with my emotions again felt ridiculous, impossible. Every woman who showed interest was immediately scrutinized. What were they concealing? What lies would they tell? How long until their true character emerged? My therapist, yes, I began seeing one because pretending to be okay wasn't working, assured me this reaction was typical. Trust, once utterly shattered, is not easily restored. It's not like a fractured bone that mends and potentially becomes stronger. It is more like splintered glass. You can use adhesive to reattach the pieces, but the fracture lines will always remain visible, and you will never again handle it casually. I learned to accept this reality. People kept asking if I wanted vengeance, if I planned to publicly expose Melissa, damage her reputation, or make her suffer the way she had made me suffer. I did not. Not because I possessed some moral superiority or enlightenment, but because I came to a profound realization. The ultimate revenge is not destruction. It is indifference. It is progressing with your own life, while they are permanently stalled in the debris of their own actions. Melissa forfeited more than just a husband. She sacrificed her integrity, her dignity, her standing within our social circle, most of whom quietly stopped including her, and seemingly her career momentum. She exchanged a stable marriage and a future we were building for a brief affair with a man who couldn't even be bothered to answer her calls once the drama began. Fate had already administered its own judgment. I did not need to interfere. In the meantime, I was genuinely well. Not happy in the former way, that naive, trusting happiness that comes from believing you know a person completely, but content in a new way, a resilient way, a way born from surviving what I thought would be impossible to survive. I had learned that I was capable of being alone, that my identity was not contingent on being someone's husband, and that I could construct a life from nothing if necessary. These are invaluable lessons, even if they came at a horrific expense. Had my friends not persuaded me to go out that night, had I stayed home as I originally wished, watching nature documentaries and drinking beer alone, had I skipped Marcus's birthday, I would still be living a lie. I would still be the fool who accepted every single business trip, every late-night call, every carefully rehearsed account of dull hotel rooms and terrible client dinners. I would still be planning a future with someone who was simultaneously plotting a separate future with another person. Eventually, the truth would have been revealed. It always is. But it might have happened years later, perhaps after we had children, maybe after we had purchased a larger house together, after our lives had become even more complicated and interwoven. The resulting pain would have been exponentially worse. That night in the club broke me, but it also liberated me. It granted me something exceptionally rare and precious, absolute certainty. The undeniable knowledge that leaving was the correct and only option. No ambiguity, no what-ifs, no self-doubt about whether I had acted too hastily or surrendered too easily. I witnessed the truth with my own eyes. There was no room for her to deceive me or manipulate my understanding. That, in its own twisted way, is a gift. So, when people offer condolences like, "I'm so sorry for what you went through," I have begun to answer differently. I'm not, I tell them honestly. It was agonizing, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I am not sorry that I found out. I am not sorry that I walked away. I am not sorry that I chose myself. Because ultimately, that is what this journey boils down to, prioritizing yourself when someone else has made it perfectly clear you are not their priority. It has been a full year since that night, 12 months since my existence imploded, and I was forced to rebuild it from the rubble. I am sitting on my back porch with Max, who is now peacefully sleeping at my feet, watching the sun set, painting my garden in purples and oranges. The house feels quiet, yet it is not empty. There is a critical difference. I have learned to value the silence, to find solace in solitude. My phone vibrates. A text from Ben. "Poker game at my apartment Friday. Are you in?" I smile and tap out a reply. "Absolutely, I'm in." Last month, I encountered Melissa at a coffee shop. It was the first time we had seen each other since the divorce was finalized. She looked different, thinner, exhausted, somehow older. She approached me cautiously, as if I might fly into a rage or cause a public disturbance. "Hi," she murmured softly. "Hi, how are you?" "Good," I responded truthfully. "Really good." She nodded, appearing as though she wanted to say more, but I picked up my coffee cup and continued past her. I wasn't deliberately rude or dramatic. I simply walked by her as I would any other stranger in a coffee shop, because that's all she is to me now. A stranger who bears a resemblance to someone I once knew. Later, a friend asked if seeing her had been difficult, if it had resurrected all the previous pain, anger, and hurt. It had not. I felt absolutely nothing. And that, more than any other sign, confirmed that I had truly moved on. People ask if I will ever remarry, if I will ever open my heart enough to let someone in again. I honestly don't know. Perhaps one day, perhaps never. Right now, My focus is on constructing a life I am proud of, regardless of whether I end up sharing it with another person. I am launching a startup company with a few colleagues. It may fail, but at least it is something I am enthusiastic about. I'm currently training Max to be a therapy dog so we can visit local hospitals and nursing homes. I'm making plans for a solo backpacking trip through Southeast Asia next year. I am fully living, not merely existing in the shadow of another person's dishonesty. That night at the club, undoubtedly the worst night of my life, was also the genesis of something better. A life firmly anchored in truth rather than deception. A life where I control my own story instead of playing a minor role in someone else's tale of infidelity. Sometimes, fate doesn't guide you towards something wonderful. Sometimes, it forcefully pushes you away from something toxic disguised as love. Sometimes, the most terrible thing that happens to you is actually the universe saving you from wasting even more years on the wrong individual. I used to consider myself incredibly unfortunate to have discovered my wife's affair in such a humiliating, public manner. Now, I understand that I was profoundly lucky. Lucky to have friends who insisted I socialize that night despite my reluctance. Lucky to have uncovered the truth while I was still young enough to completely start over. Lucky to gain absolute clarity instead of continuing in a state of oblivious comfort. They claim that ignorance is bliss, but I will choose painful reality over comfortable falsehoods every single time. Because with truth, at least you know where you stand. With truth, you are equipped to make conscious, informed decisions about your future. With truth, you can recover from real injuries instead of being slowly corroded by hidden lies. I am 35 years old now, single, residing in a home I purchased myself, with a dog I rescued, and chasing dreams that are entirely my own creation. And you know what? I am happy, genuinely, authentically happy, in a way I never achieved during those 5 years of marriage, even before I knew about the affair. Because this happiness is my own creation. It is not conditional on another person's actions, or their faithfulness, or their honesty. It is simply mine, and no one can take it away from me. So to my friends who practically dragged me to that club against my explicit wishes, I say thank you. You genuinely saved my life that evening, even though it certainly didn't feel like it at the time. To Melissa, I do not forgive you, but I also bear you no hatred. You are merely a chapter in my life that has been closed permanently. I hope you eventually found whatever it was you were searching for, and I truly hope it justified the tremendous cost. To anyone reading this who has suffered betrayal, whose trust has been obliterated, who has been forced to completely rebuild their life from nothing, things do improve. Not instantly, not without great effort, but eventually. The initial pain becomes manageable. The raw anger transforms into indifference. The feeling of loss becomes complete liberation. And one day, you will recognize that the person who broke your heart actually gave you the key to your freedom. This is not an act of forgiveness. This is not claiming the infidelity was acceptable or that it wasn't agonizing. This is merely acknowledging that sometimes the worst experiences catalyze the most profound transformations. Sometimes you must lose the person you were to uncover the person you were truly meant to become. And sometimes fate maneuvers you into a club on a Friday night, not for mere entertainment, but to force your eyes open to a truth you absolutely had to see, even if the process completely destroys you. Even if rebuilding demands every ounce of strength you possess. Because a life constructed on truth, regardless of how painful that truth is, will always be superior to a life built on lies, no matter how comforting those lies felt at the time. That is the single most important thing I have learned in the years since my world fell apart. That is the wisdom I salvaged from the wreckage. And if I had to endure it all again, the pain, the deception, the heartbreak, the public humiliation, to arrive at where I stand today, I would do so instantly. Because this life, this honest, self-aware, independent life, is worth every moment of suffering it took to attain it. That is the silent truth of betrayal that no one talks about. Sometimes, it is not the conclusion of your story. Sometimes, it is simply the beginning of a significantly better one. Subscribe for more interesting stories, and help the channel grow.